Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori Amin, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us.
Hi, Layla. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So happy to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I write queer romantic suspense and contemporary romance. So romantic suspense tends to be action-packed, lots of twists and turns. I have several series out: Agents Irish and Whiskey, Trouble Brewing, and then Fog City, which we're here to talk about today. And then in contemporary romance, I have a swimmer sports series, and then I love doing foodie romance. So that's my other big passion. So have a couple books out: Dine With Me and Last Drop and more coming in that universe.
Oh, delicious. Yeah, we were actually doing our Patreon community, and so we have like a monthly meetup, and our next monthly meetup is about we share book recommendations, so we have a theme. So foodie romance is the theme. So I'm just gonna bring it up to my Patreon. We're like, hey, we got some more foodie romance to look for. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I love this.
Yeah, no, I am a foodie, so it even in my romantic suspense, the food's there, right? Like I can't help it. It's just
Here we go. So, talking about romantic suspense, like what's the process like to mix both the happily ever after the romance as well as the action pack of just putting things, like twists and turns that you expect from that?
Yeah, I mean, I really like plot heavy as a reader and as a writer. And I think part of that's because I come kind of from TV land, in that, I mean, I watched TV before I read books, and particularly a lot of action TV, a lot of action movies. But I was always like, where's the romance angle? It's like, can Mulder and Scully get together finally? Right. So I always wanted that aspect of it. And so to me, typically the plot part comes first. That every now and then that'll change. But I'll get the plot part first typically, and then how those characters work into it, right? And it's tricky, but it's also, I mean, I find it actually easier because I can balance kind of internal and external conflict. Like it's not only their inner, workings and their own hangups that are keeping the two main characters apart. There's a dude chasing them in a boat. Right, or something to that effect. And so it adds some extra tension, and it adds another way of dealing with conflict, and to see how they as a couple deal with that conflict. So
I think it's like a nice little mix of it. And so I'm curious, with Fox City is like a whole world. It's a couple families, there's the Russian mafia, there's the police, there's a whole world. And so what was the part of you to create this world building that took place?
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I cheated a little bit. It's the same world as Irish and Whiskey. They you don't see them in there, but like it's San Francisco. It's current. But I mean, part of the reason I did Fog City was because I wanted a little bit of a change from writing the LEOs as the front and center at the law enforcement. There are no rules when you write assassins. That's fun. And mobsters. So it was kind of nice to kind of do something in the same kind of setting, and technically in the same world. The characters do start to cross over. But to kind of take it out of the rule structure, even though they always end up in the federal building altogether. But I just really liked it. I liked building it. I can't help but build these big worlds because I think, when I did start reading romance, Kristen Ashley was kind of my gateway drug into reading romance. And anyone who reads her stuff knows that, the detective agency, like all these people are everywhere. Right? Like even in LA, in Denver, and the other story, in the smaller Colorado town. And so coming from that kind of a indoctrination of romance reading, that's kind of also where my brain went. As for building a big world, mine just happens to have explosions and car chases in it.
I love this. And so what encouraged you to write queer romance? Like, so let's talk about that.
What was it? I'm sorry.
What encouraged you to write queer romance? Even girls, like this is unique. It sets it apart,
Yeah. I mean, I think you need representation across all genres. And for me too, what's particularly important now with Queen's Ransom is it's an FF, like also writing across a broad representation within the LGBTQ community as well. And so, I think bringing that in, and, it's in a lot of these, for me, it's just who the characters are. And, all the same kind of stuff is happening. It's still, romantic suspense, but the characters happen to be queer. It is a big part of who they are. It's not necessarily the focus of what the story is in this case. But for Celia in Queen's Ransom, she's just, it's not a coming out story because she accepts it. But it is her first time with someone of the same gender. And she's only ever been with her high school sweetheart, right? So it is a little bit of her coming to understand that. And I think that's where a lot of people actually come to, of the late kind of awakening and late embracing of sexuality that's not necessarily het.
Yeah, I really love like the fact that you're just like, it was like not a big deal. Like it was just like, it was bound to happen. There was slow burn and they were like bound to get together. And you had two alpha heroines. Like they were like, they each were on top of their game and their family and their space. And they were like, so it was like coming to terms with like two alpha, heroines like coming together. Like it's
And I've always written alpha heroines, like even, Mel in Irish and Whiskey, she runs everything. Like she shows up, she was an FBI agent, then she's head of security for Tally Enterprises, and she's a bounty hunter. And so she shows up in Fog City, and in a planned spinoff. And so she's kind of my alpha. She's the only person who can best Helena in hand-to-hand combat. But then what I loved about Celia is that she was a different kind of alpha, right? It wasn't about hand-to-hand combat, and it wasn't about necessarily, she can protect herself. Helena and Mel have worked with her to get there. She's an abuse survivor, so she had the motivation there as well. But she's the alpha of the household too, right? Like this family of really, the Perrys and the Madigans, they were so caught up in the whole mafia assassin, like stuff's always hitting the fan, right? They needed somebody at home to take care, to ground them, right? To be the home and hearth character. And Celia knows who she is. Like she's strong. She's alpha in her own right. And they need that kind of a balanced alpha too.
Love that.
So yeah.
What has it been like for writing the pandemic? Because I know it's been a year. Things have changed.
Yeah. It was tough, right? I was at the beginning of last year coming off a book, Variable Onset, that I had written, and was editing that the first part of the year. It was a book that came out last year. It was a romantic mystery. And I also had another short story, The Last Drop, that I was adapting into a slightly longer novella. And then and that was in April, it came out, and I hit a wall. I mean, like, it was hard to get the motivation. I mean, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a thing, right, in psychology, because you have to have those basic needs met, safety, food, shelter, before you can really excel with the creative, right? And work up, the pyramid. And so for me, I did hit that wall. And my day jobs kind of also went bananas as a result of the pandemic, because I'm not a full-time writer. I am in a field that was drastically affected. And so it was rough. But then actually what I did was, I was working along on Queen's Ransom, but the book after that, Silent Night, which is Holt and Kane, Holt is demi. He's demisexual. And so there's a lot of relationship building that has to go into play when you are doing a demi character that you have to set up, because the whole point of demisexuality is the trust in the relationship and the friendship and that deep connection coming first before the romance comes. I had planned to start their book in one place. I started it in a different place. And the first part of that book are vignettes. So little scenes, snapshots. Those were a lot easier to write in the pandemic, right? It was a lot less daunting than the back half of the book, which is all of the typical romantic suspense element. What's going on? And so that really helped me push through. And I come from fan fiction. And a lot of what I did in fan fiction was that kind of vignette writing, right? And so getting back to something that was just like at the base core of what how I came to writing. And so it really helped kind of get it going. And then from there, I did a short story for a giveaway, another short story that I owed fans, and that kind of worked up the muscles again, right? And then got back into the full swing with Queen and finishing up Night 2. So
what kind of fan fiction did you write?
X-Files. Oh, I mean, like long ago, X-Files.
Okay. I'm just curious about where whenever I mention fan fiction, there's so many worlds out there, like fandoms, and I'm like, which one did you cut?
I did X-Files. I started doing that in high school. I remember the first episode I watched of the X-Files was Home, season 4, which was that awful one. Everyone who watches the X-Files knows that one. It's the one in the country with the, it was on the night before the SATs. And I watched it. And that was the stupidest thing I ever did in my life. And then I went back and watched all the earlier seasons. So that I did that through like most of college, actually, and law school and law practice in a big firm killed creativity for a good 10 years. And then I found my way back through the Vampire Diaries, actually. So I did some Vampire Diaries fan fiction and a little bit of other stuff that was on CW, like a couple Arrow pieces with Felicity and Oliver, and little bits here and there of things that caught my interest. I think maybe a Firefly piece at one point. So that's how I came back around to it. And then I just decided to, at a point, do my own thing. Like I had a story and didn't want to be stuck in canon. And I had written AU kind of stuff for Vampire Diaries. So like where they're not vampires. I was like, well, why don't I do my own characters? And just kind of went from there.
I love this. And when did you start writing, like publishing books? When
so
your own stuff,
So in I think Nano 2014 or 2015 was when I did my first kind of full length book, and that was an MF romance love triangle. And I was kind of on the fence the whole time, and I'm actually working that book again into a poly that's going to come out later this year. Okay, and I'm so happy because I redid this one scene and I'm like, I knew they should have kissed from the get-go. And I'm like, yeah, that's better. And that book had never sold. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to self-publish it. I'm going to make it a poly because that's what it always should have been in the first place. Yeah. And then the next book that I wrote and sold was Single Malt. And that was the first book of Agent Saracen Whiskey. So
I love that.
Yeah. And then that was it. That book published in, that was February 27th, 2017. So, and then it's just been a wild ride since.
I love this so much. I love that you take a love triangle and no, just make it poly.
Just make it poly. I mean, it was,
everyone gets to happily ever after.
Right? I mean, there's just this one scene where it's the two guys, where one of them comes back right? Like there was the three of them that were best friends, and one of them comes back after being gone for 10 years. And the other male character confronts him, and there's this tension. And I'm like, yeah, they always should have been together. And he had good tension with the female lead too. So I'm like, you know what? No, this is a poly. This should have always been a poly. Let's go. And then I got the perfect photo for it the other day, and I'm just like, okay, and we're going. This is finally going to happen.
I love this. Oh my god.
Yeah.
So let's talk about books. Do you have a book that you recommend to our listeners?
Yeah. So I think, some of the books I've really loved this year that I've read. I've been a little slow because a lot of writing stuff, but Beautiful and Terrible Things by Riley Hart, I thought was a great book. It's one of those rip your heart out and put it back together kind of books. So definitely an angst fest, but so well done. I thought it was just a gorgeous book. If you want to read more FF, two really stellar books this year have been Uncharted by Allie Temple. That's also Allison Temple. It's queer pirates and a princess. It is Queer Princess Bride, sort of. And it's lovely. And the cover is beautiful. Party Favors by Erin McClellan. It actually came out last December, but it's set at New Year's. So I kind of associate it with being this year. And that's in her So Over the Holiday series, which is the queer rom-com series set at different holidays, very sex positive, very just fun, great, sexy as hell, great series. And they're novellas, so they're quick reads, which is really nice. And then for people who like urban fantasy or paranormal, two series I've really enjoyed: Magic in Manhattan by Allie Theron. It's a 1920s paranormal, one of the best Grumpy Sunshine pairings I think I've seen. And the Grumpy one's also a cinnamon roll, so it's fantastic. And then the Soulbound series by Haley Turner. And that's coming up. Echo and the Sorrow is March 1st, and that's book 6. And then book 7, which is the last book in the series, is later this year. And that's urban fantasy, and the world building is out of this world. It is just phenomenal. So
I love this. I love this so much.
Yeah.
So tell us where we can find you online.
Yeah. So I'm online at www.laylareyne.com is my homepage. And then all the socials, Twitter, Facebook, and Insta at Layla Reyne. And I just got a TikTok. I haven't started using it, so I got to get on that. And then I have a Facebook group, Layla's Lushes, as well. So lots of, we talk about books, a lot of foodie talk too. There's a lot of recipes flying around. So
awesome. Thank you, Layla, for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For book recommendations, author interview archives, and other fun book resources and tips, please visit WhatchReNextBlog.com. The Watch Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Network. To discover new shows to listen and love, please visit frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.